All right, today we are diving headfirst into one of the biggest, weirdest mysteries in all of science. We're talking about that strange, spooky connection between the quantum world and, well, us, our own conscious minds. And it all boils down to this one kind of haunting question. I mean, we look around and the world seems solid, right? It's predictable, it's real. But, and this is a huge but, quantum physics tells us that when we're not looking, reality is something else. It's like this ghostly fog of all possibilities happening at once. So how in the world does the simple act of looking at something turn that quantum blur into the one single solid reality we all agree on? You know, this whole puzzle has a name, the measurement problem. And for the better part of a century, it has been the greatest unsolved case in all of physics. So I want you to think of this as a detective story, and we're going to follow the clues together. This right here, this visual really gets to the heart of the problem. Over on the left, you've got the quantum state. Physicists call it a superposition, which is a fancy way of saying a particle is literally in all possible places at the same time. It's a cloud of potential. But then, on the right, you have what we actually see when we measure it. One particle, one location. Definite. So the million-dollar question is, how do we get from that blurry cloud of maybes to a single, concrete, this is it? This sudden snap from all possibilities to one reality is what physicists call a collapse of the wave function. It's like the universe suddenly makes up its mind. But what's the trigger? What force, what interaction is causing this collapse to happen? This, right here, is the central clue in our entire investigation. So to solve this mystery, physicists have rounded up a few, let's call them the usual suspects. These are the classic theories that have all tried, and you could argue all failed, to really explain what's going on. First up, we've got the old classic, the Copenhagen interpretation. This one basically says, look, it just happens, don't worry about it. The act of measurement itself just causes the collapse, and that's it. It's practical, sure, but it's also deeply unsatisfying, because it tells you what happens, but gives you zero clues as to how or why. It says collapse is a real physical thing, but the actual mechanism? Total mystery. Okay, next is the many worlds interpretation, and this one is a wild ride. It says the wave never actually collapses at all. Instead, every single possible outcome really does happen. It just happens in its own separate parallel universe. So yeah, it's an elegant solution in a way, but it's also mind-bogglingly extravagant. It suggests that the reality we experience is just one single branch on an infinite tree of universes. And then we have the most provocative suspect of them all. This is the idea, often tied to the physicist Eugene Wigner, that consciousness itself is the culprit. In this view, our conscious mind isn't just a passive spectator. It's an active player that literally reaches out and forces that quantum wave to physically collapse into the one reality we experience. So you can see the dilemma here, right? We're kind of stuck. One theory says collapse is a physical process, but offers no explanation. Another says it's not real, but we have to believe in an infinite number of universes. And a third says our minds have a kind of superpower to change the physical world. Honestly, each one of these just opens up a whole new can of worms. But what if we've been looking for clues in all the wrong places? What if the crime scene of the collapse isn't happening out there in the world at all? Let's follow a brand new lead. And this is the key insight of a new hypothesis that completely flips the investigation on its head. The big idea is that the collapse isn't some physical event that violently changes the universe. No, it's an experiential event that happens inside the observer, and it's dictated by the very structure of our consciousness. Now, this new lead suggests we can model a conscious observer as something called a conscious manifold. I know, it sounds super technical, but think of it like this. It's basically a blueprint for consciousness. It's a set of rules that governs our inner world, the rules that make sure our experience feels like one single, unified story from moment to moment. So this blueprint for your mind has 3 key rules. Let's break them down. First, there's a state space. That's just a list of every single thing you could possibly experience, every sight, every sound, every thought. Then there's integration. This one is huge. It's the rule that says your experience right now is one single unified picture. You don't experience 1,000 separate pixels. You experience it all together as one moment. And third, a temporal law. This is what creates that continuous, unbroken feeling of being the same you that you were a second ago. It's the thread of your identity. And these rules aren't just philosophical ideas, they are hard constraints on what it's like to be a conscious being. Okay, So if that's the structure of the observer, what's its MO? Its modus operandi. How do these rules of consciousness actually interact with the quantum world to cook up the reality that we see? So first up is the unity constraint. Your conscious mind is basically like a single screen. It can show a movie, absolutely, but what it can't do is show two completely different, contradictory movies at the exact same instant. The very structure of your consciousness forbids you from experiencing a superposition, like seeing a cat as both dead and alive at the same time. It's one or the other. Second, there's the projection constraint. So the act of observing is kind of like a movie projector. It takes this incredibly complex, multi-layered film reel, that's the quantum superposition with all its possibilities, and it displays only one clear, definite frame onto the screen of your awareness. It's a process that, by its very nature, has to reduce all those possibilities down to a single outcome for you to experience. And third, and this one is deep, is the continuity constraint. Your sense of self, who you are, is an unbroken story. For that story to even make sense, you can only follow one timeline. The rules of consciousness simply forbid your experience from splitting off into multiple futures, because that would literally shatter your sense of a continuous identity. Okay, so let's put it all together. How do these three fundamental constraints on our conscious experience finally solve the measurement problem that has been driving physicists crazy for 100 years? And here it is. This is the solution to the whole mystery. All the old theories, they all made the same fundamental mistake. They assumed the collapse was a physical event out there in the world, that the quantum wave was literally breaking apart. But this new model says no, the physical wave never breaks. The collapse is purely an experiential event. It's not happening out there in the universe, it's a projection happening inside the observer's mind, forced by those rules of consciousness we just talked about. Let that sink in for a second. This is the radical conclusion. The physical wave function never collapses. It always evolves perfectly smoothly, following the laws of physics to the letter. What we call collapse is just an artifact, a side effect, of how our conscious minds are built to perceive the universe. So, what does this do to our original suspects? Well, Copenhagen was half right. We do experience something that looks and feels like a collapse, but they were wrong to think it was a physical event. Many worlds, it just becomes unnecessary. We don't need to invent infinite physical universes because these strict rules of our own consciousness already prevent us from ever experiencing those other branches anyway. And Wigner? Oh, Wigner was so close. He was right that consciousness is the key, but it doesn't have some magic power to cause a physical collapse. Instead, its own internal structure simply forces it to select one definite experience from all the possibilities out there. It's a selection, not a creation. And this leads to a really profound and actually testable prediction. If the collapse is a private, internal event, a subjective projection in your mind, then it should leave zero physical traces in the outside world. No instrument, no other person could ever tell that a collapse has occurred inside your head, because physically, out in the universe, nothing actually broke, nothing changed. So this brings us to the final, absolutely stunning implication of this whole line of thinking. It forces us to completely rethink what collapse even is. And this is the thought I really want to leave you with. If the solid, definite, classical world we see all around us is actually a projection created by the lens of our conscious mind, what does that say about the true nature of reality? What does the universe really look like when there's no projector around to turn that ghostly quantum wave into a single, solid image?